Hey everyone, this is Nathan Williams with BlackRain79.com, and I am back here with another hand history review for you guys. So today's hand was sent to me by Mike from Canada, and as you guys can see there, he has Ace Jack of Hearts in the small blind in a 1 cent, 2 cent, 6 max cash game. So let's just jump right into it. Alright, so it folds to Villain 2 in middle position, and he decides to limp into the pot. Limp, yes. So we already know what that means. If you guys watch my videos, read my books, my blog posts, you know that I do not recommend limping. That, as I say, that's pretty much a dead tell these days of a recreational player, otherwise known as a fish. And Mike has given me the HUD stats to definitely conclude that that's the case. This guy's HUD stats are, his VPIP is 85, his preflop raise is 13, and his aggression factor is 6.7. HUD stats, by the way, you can get these on your table if you want. These are basically reads based off hands you've played against these players. I'll leave a link in the description below if you want to get these stats, like I said, on your screen. But basically, when I see some guy who is playing a 85, 13, 6.7, there is no question on earth that that is a fish, recreational player, a fun player, whatever you want to call it. There's no good player in the history of poker who has ever played 85% of his hands in a ring game. I suppose in heads up you could play 85% of your hands, but in a ring game, that is way, way too many hands. This is your classic whale fish. So he's limped into the pot because that's what fishy players do. Villain 3 and Villain 4 get out of the way. So it's back on Mike here in the small blind. So what should he do with Ace Jack of Hearts here? Well, as I always talk about in my books, these videos on my blog, we definitely need to be raising and taking control of the pot here. As I talk about in Crushing the Micro Stakes, though, when you're out of position like this, I suggest bumping it up even more than normal. You want to add in extra big blinds due to your positional disadvantage. Remember, we're in the small blind in this hand here, meaning that we have to act first on all streets post-flop. This is a proven statistical disadvantage, so we want to bump it up more than normal in a situation like this. We also want to add an extra big blind for the limper as well. So I would typically make it about 12 cents to go here. Mike decides to make it 10. I mean, it's kind of splitting hairs. 10 cents, 12 cents. I like it a little bit more, but it's okay. So Villain 5 does make a call, and let me quickly get the stats on that guy. That guy is a 19-14-1. Once again, that's VPIP, PFR, and aggression factor. So those kind of stats indicate basically a regular to me, kind of a nitty kind of regular, I would say. So versus these kind of players, typically they're very easy to play against because they just play their hands very transparently. You know, if he decides to make some big moves on us after the flop, he probably has something good. And usually on the flop, we'll just be able to bet, and if he has nothing, he'll just go away. So these kind of players, just a typical multi-tabling, probably multi-tabling, nitty kind of regular. These are very, very easy players to play against. They just play their hand, like I said, very transparently. So Villain 2, of course, does make the call because that's what fishy players love to do. So let's go to a flop. All right, so it's a pretty good flop with the Ace 8-4 with 2 clubs. So there's a couple draws out there. There's a couple gut shots with the 5, 6, 6, 7, stuff like that. There's a couple combo draws if they've got a 5, 6 of clubs. So there's a couple big draws out there, a couple sort of straight draws, but overall, it's a pretty good board for our hand here. Chances are there's nobody in there with ace-king or ace-queen because they probably would have re-raised us pre-flop. So we stand to have the best hand here the large majority of the time. Now, what should we do in a spot like this? Well, let me just show what Mike does first. Mike decides to check. Now, I don't think that's the worst play in this world. Now, the whole point of this, of course, is to go for a check raise in a situation like this against weaker recreational players at lower stakes. However, with Ace-Jack, I think I don't know that I really want to pump up the pot big time with this hand and go for stacks. I think I do feel more comfortable doing it with ace-king, ace-queen. Definitely do it with 2 pairs, with sets, all that kind of stuff. I want to make it clear that versus multiple players here, I think it can be a reasonable idea. Versus one player, I don't like check raising in a spot like this, but overall, I do think this is a reasonable decision that Mike made in this spot. The other obvious decision is just to bet out, make it, 20 cents, I would say, 25 cents to go. A strong bet to get value, as I always talk about in everything I put out at these for these lower stakes games. But I think going for a check raise specifically against the fish, I think makes sense. Now, if villain 5 bets here, remember he's the tight, transparent, nitty regular, I do not want to be check raising that player because I already discussed that these players play their hand face up, and if he makes a bet here, he's probably got something pretty good. So I don't want to overplay my hand versus that player. But versus villain 2, who is the recreational player, I think that going for a check raise in this spot can be a reasonable decision. Remember that villain 2 also started the hand short stacked. I'm kind of mad at myself that I didn't talk about that off the start because I always do. He started the hand slightly short stacked, I think with about 80 big blinds or something like that. So that makes it, with a hand like top pair and with his player type of, the fishy player type, going to be in there with all sorts of hands, it's going to be pretty hard for me to get away from this hand. So I don't mind Mike's decision here to go for a check raise against that player. So let's just move along here, see what happens. So villain 5, who's the nit, does check, and villain 2 decides to make his fish bet of 2 cents. I've talked about these a million times before. Basically, I suggest that you just ignore this completely. It is a mathematically insignificant, irrelevant bet. And I would suggest that when somebody makes the minimum bet like this, which is what recreational players do, just ignore it, pretend he checked, because it's not a bet. Like, it doesn't mean anything. So it is back on Mike here. And he decides to pump it up, of course, as he should. However, I'm going to disagree a little bit again with the bet sizing here. I really would like it to see it a lot more. Just get the money in. It is definitely constant, I would say, thing that I'm talking about in a lot of these hand reviews. Generally, people are just not betting enough in these low-stakes games, and this has been something that I've been talking about for years and years and years, guys. And I really think that there's a lot of stuff out there these days teaching GTO theory and tournament-type bet sizing that is cool for tournaments, and it's cool for mid-stakes and high-stakes, but it's not optimal in these games. You want to be betting, like I talk about in my first book, Crush It to Micro Stakes, just pot it. Like, just hit the pot button. I know people think that's crazy. It's not. Versus recreational players in particular, they're going to call with anything. So you don't have to balance your bet sizing. You don't need to make some cutesy 40% of the pot or something like that. Just hit the pot button. Overbet if you want. I mean, honestly, I do that sometimes, and I get called all the time, especially if you got a loose image. It helps a lot. Anyways, I'm not going to quibble too much about it. Like the pre-flop, I'd like to see it a bit more as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to quibble a little bit about it. I would like to see it more here. Make it 25 cents. Make it 30 cents. Just get the money in, and let's not see like a 7 of clubs on the turn and then he goes all in and we don't know what to do. Just get more in right now, and then the turn just plays itself, So, and there's no scare cards to scare him off. Anyways, that rant's over. Let's just move on here. Villain 5 gets that out of the way, and villain 2, he actually clicks it back for a flop 3 bet. Now, honestly, usually when I see this kind of thing, I'm not jumping for joy when I'm sitting there with ace jack of hearts. It's, in a spot like this, if villain 2 is not on some kind of crazy tilt, it is definitely going to be, he's going to have a strong hand here a fair amount of the time. I think the question is, can we get away here? He had an 80 big blind starting stack, remember? I'm going to say it's pretty close. I would say that when I'm playing my best here, I probably do get away, because I just asked myself, is he going to do this with like an ace deuce or something like this? I think you guys already know the answer to that. No, he's just going to call, because that's what recreational players do. I can't really blame Mike for just shipping the money in here. Definitely if I have any kind of dynamic going on with this player, and what I mean by that is, like, I've been playing a lot of pots with this guy, perhaps pounding on him, which is what I recommend heavily in everything I put out, raising them up. And if I've won several pots in a row against this guy, I'm definitely going to be doing what Mike does here and just shove it in, because a lot of times they're going to be sick of me. They're going to be like, I'm making my stand with my ace 5 here, and I'm not putting up with this guy anymore. So I do think that the history here actually plays the dynamic, the recent history actually plays a large role in this hand. And of course, unfortunately, Mike didn't give me that information. In a vacuum, assuming this is my first hand ever against this player, it's close, and I'm going to lean slightly towards a fold. But if there is some recent history of me beating up on this guy a lot, as I usually am doing. That's what the whole point of playing against recreational players is. I know that they are often going to crack against me at a certain point, take their stick in the sand and say, I've had enough of this guy. And so I'm often understanding that psychology at play. I'm going to ship a hand like this in for value. So it is difficult to make a decision on this hand not knowing any recent history. I'm going to say, though, in a vacuum, though, I do prefer maybe, well, a call or a fold seems a little bit weak, actually, compared when he just clicks it back. But then again, what do we do on a turn if he ships? It's a tough spot overall, guys. I'm not really going to lie. Mike does decide to ship it in, and we'll just kind of see how it runs out. So turn's pretty good, obviously, with giving us a 2-pair there, and the river's the 5 of diamonds. See the results here, and he flips over pocket aces. Wow. Didn't see that one coming. I guess really I think this hand kind of, guys, just goes to show that everyone's always going to have a range in poker, and this guy is on top 1% of his range in this spot here. Does that mean we should ever get away from it? I think it's debatable. As I always talk about in these videos, we need to think about poker hands in terms of their entire range, though. Aces is one crazy part of his range. He can also have some sort of a hand like 8-9. He could have a hand like ace-5. He could have a flush draw. I'm talking about on the flop when all the action took place. You know, he could be on a wild bluff. So we have to consider his entire range when we play against this player here. It's difficult not knowing if there's any recent history with this player, but I would say that overall, I think it's pretty close. I think that the results of this hand don't really have any bearing on how we should actually play the hand. Okay, cool, he's got aces, but he could have pocket deuces as well, just as easily, I would say, versus a crazy player like this. So overall, this is basically just a massive cooler that's, there's not really a whole lot to say. The only decision is, what should we have done on the flop? I think I'm just kind of repeating myself at this point. I think it is close, and recent history usually is the determining factor in what decision I make. So anyways, I think that's about all I got to say with this hand, guys. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below, as always. How do you play this hand, starting from pre-flop to flop? Do you just, how do you play the flop? Do you bet out? I think that's the other thing, is if we do just bet out on the flop here, it changes the complexion of the hand, of course. Or if you go for the check raise there, do you ship it all in? Do you just call? What sizing are you using? Let me know all that, your thoughts on this spot in the comments below. And if you guys enjoy watching micro-stakes poker strategy videos like this, make sure you give this video a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel. So I'm putting out videos like this all the time. And lastly, if you want to know my complete strategy for how I crush these low-stakes, micro-stakes games online, make sure you grab a copy of my free poker cheat sheet called Massive Profit at the Micros. It is the top link in the description below. And once again, that'll give you my complete strategy for how I play every single situation in these low-stakes games. It's only about 50 pages. You can read it in an afternoon. And, of course, it's free. You can't beat free, right? So, thanks a lot for watching, guys. This has been Nathan Williams with BlackRain79.com.